Hey guys, so when I sit down to do a mix, I say, all right, during this time, I am going to be mixing. The one thing that I want to make sure that I'm not spending time doing is not mixing because I'm doing a bunch of repetitive setup work, right? If you have been mixing for any period of time, you have probably recognized, yeah, you know what? There's certain things that I do on every single mix. And so I don't want to have to redo those things every time. Okay, there might be a certain way that you set up your buses, or even your color coding, or just different things that you're like, I don't want to have to do this every time. I literally do this every time. Well, if that's the case, you can use a mix template. And I want to show you my mix template and then kind of walk through it and talk about some of the things I've done, some of the things that I don't do, and kind of give you some inspiration to create a mix template if you're not using one, or maybe show you some things that you could possibly do that you're not doing in the mix template you're using. So cue the intro and then let's get into it. Alexa, open the studio.
At McCrae Music.
Okay, so a mix template, as I said, is going to save you some time from doing repetitive, cyclical tasks that you literally do every time you do a mix, all right? And before I show you my mix template and we kind of walk through it, let me just always remind you, anything that I show you guys on this channel is not to say to you, hey, you have to do it this way because I'm Ed and this is how I do it. No, that's not the case at all, all right? And I don't want you to ever feel that way when you're looking at anything anyone is doing. Okay. All I want to do is share with you my process and the way I do things. And, hopefully you'll take some things away that maybe you can implement into what you're doing. And if there are other things that you're like, I don't really like that much, that's perfectly fine, right? Just take the stuff you can use, throw out the stuff that you don't. But the most important thing that you should absolutely do every time is hit like on the video. So go ahead and just do that right now for the Mr. YouTube algorithm, and let's go on over into my mix template. All right, guys, so here I am. I'm in my mix template. I'm using Luna, of course. Card up in the top if you are interested in the totality of my workflow and what I use for what, and how I go from creation all the way through to the finished product. Check that video out. I think that'll help you. Also, card up in the top if you're interested to know why I switched from Pro Tools to Luna for mixing and mastering and editing. I think those videos will be interesting to you. But here I am in Luna. I am in my mix template currently. And let's actually go over to our mixer view so that we can see all the stuff that's going on over here. And let's take a look. So the majority, or pretty much all of my mix template, is going to just consist of buses from left to right here. This is an audio track. I'll talk about that in a moment. But from left to right, I got a bunch of buses. Now, the one thing that you see I do not have is a bunch of audio tracks. All right. I have that one audio track at the beginning for mix print. I do like to print my mix into the session. It's not something that you have to do. I like to do that. I'll talk about that and why I like to do that at the end. But other than that, I don't have any audio tracks in here. Some engineers will. Some engineers will actually create the audio tracks. They'll be blank, obviously, but they'll create, hey, I know I'm going to have a kick in, kick out. I know I'm going to have snare top, snare bottom. I know I'm going to have lead guitar left, lead guitar right, whatever the case might be. I know I'm going to have these elements, and they'll just build those in. The reasons why I don't do that is, one, I do a wide variety of stuff. So, I'm not like just mixing the same genre of music all the time. If I were, I would probably lean towards doing that because I know, hey, I'm going to have these elements on every single song. But I can go from mixing like a hip hop track, a heavy like trap beat or something with somebody today, to like a full live band and choir tomorrow, to somebody's church service, to an audio book, right? There's just a wide variety of things that I do. And so it really wouldn't benefit me to just put a bunch of audio tracks in there that I would end up ultimately having to delete or rename or something anyway. So that's why I don't do that. The other reason why I don't do that is I tend to like to let the project that I'm working on kind of speak to me and define some of the different elements and things that I'm actually using in that project. All right. I don't want to force myself to say, hey, I have to put a reverb here because there's a reverb bus. Got to do that. Right. That particular project might not need that. Right. So I tend to use some of my bus naming and routing as a part of my mixing process. And I like to do it that way. But if you don't like that, you don't have to do that, of course. If it suits you better to have audio tracks that are already there, you can obviously do that. So what I have here is, like I said, a bunch of buses. All right, so let's talk about these buses. We'll work from right to left and just talk. So this first section in kind of this darker purple here are my buses. And I use buses for what we would call gain staging. Ooh. All right, now we'll talk about gain staging in a separate video, but that's very important. But just at a very high level, gain staging is me putting various points of control in my mix to allow me to make sure that by the time control my gain or the levels down here so that by the time I get to my mix bus, I'm not overloaded and clipping and just having a whole bunch of mess to clean up down here. Okay. And so buses are a great way to create gain staging. For example, I know that in pretty much every mix that I have, I'm going to have a drum bus. Now, I might have some mixes that don't have drums at all, or maybe just have one or two. No need to have a drum bus, but I got a bunch of drums. I'm going to take one of these buses, and I have stereo buses here, and I'm going to turn them into, I'm going to label this drum bus, and I'm going to route all my drums into this bus. This is going to help me out in several ways. One, is going to help me with gain staging. When I'm looking at this drum bus, if I see that my drum bus is overloading, it's clipping, or it's just too hot, it's way too hot, or maybe there's one particular drum that is really kind of pushing things over, probably the kick or the snare, right? Those transients can really, make things get pretty hot pretty quickly. I can go in and be able to fix that at this level because I know that if my drum bus is clipping and overloading or really hot, by the time I get down here, there are going to be some problems happening over here in my mix bus probably, right? So this gives me a point of control where I can go in and adjust the gain, adjust things for the individual tracks, adjust even the gain of the drums overall. Maybe the drums are hitting the way I want. I just need the overall level of all the drums to come down in the mix. I can just pull this fader, pull it down. There we go. All right. The other reason I like to use buses is if I want to shape the sound of a group of instruments or a group of tracks, okay? So in the instance of drums, right, I might say, hey, there's a certain sound I want the drums to have. I want to apply some EQ or maybe some compression or maybe something else on all the drums. I can do that here. Or something else very common, vocals, right? I got a bunch of background vocals. I want to apply a uniform sound to all my background vocals, right? I can do all that right here on my bus, okay? So I use buses all the time. And so I've just got a bunch of buses just sitting here for me. I have about 10 mono buses and about 10 stereo buses. Actually, exactly 10 stereo buses. Reading is fundamental. That says bus 10, right? So I got 10 stereo buses and I got 10 mono buses, right? They're already routed to my mix bus. That routing will likely change in my actual mix, but at the least, if I forget to change the routing, they are at least hitting the mix bus, so I know they'll show up in my mix print and in any of my bounces or things that I'm doing, right? So they're already routed. And so when I import my tracks and I say, hey, I've got drums, I want a drum bus, I can just come over here, grab bus whatever, drag it down to where my drums are, route them into it, rename it drum bus or whatever, and it's already there. Okay. So I don't have to recreate all those buses. They're all sitting here for me. Now, I've also done the same thing. I have another set of 8 buses here that I'm specifically going to use for effects. So for my reverbs, for delays, for choruses, maybe for parallel compression or things like that. I just have a bunch of buses already dedicated where I can just drop them in. They're already routed to the mix bus. I can just go ahead and put whatever it is I want. Again, Some people will already have a particular reverb that they use or a particular delay that they use. I tend to not do that because, again, I don't want to get into autopilot mode. I want to make sure that I'm giving that mix exactly what that mix needs. All right. And so for that cause, I do not have that set up. But I have these dedicated buses that I can just go ahead and use for effects. And everything is being fed into the mix bus. All right. Now, when we continue over our next stage here, I have a music mix and I have a vocal mix. Okay. This is going to be another or next stage of gain staging for me. So, all of my instruments, so my individual instruments that are not going to buses, and all of my buses that contain the instrumentation are all going to be fed into my music mix. Okay. And then all my vocals obviously are going to be fed into the vocal mix. This is great because it gives me a way to, again, gain stage. If I notice that my mix bus is hitting a lot hotter, nothing's clipping, or I'm not using this to kind of hide clipping or anything like that, but my mix bus is hitting a little bit harder than I want it to hit, I can just come over here, pull down my music and my vocal mix, and now my mix bus is good, right? Or I might want to adjust the blend overall between all of the music and all the vocals. Maybe I need to nudge the vocals up just a little bit or pull the vocals back just a little bit in the overall mix. I can use these to do that, right? So that's what I mean when I say that the routing for these buses will ultimately change because I'm going to take effects and, the other buses and route them to, if they're for vocals, I'm going to route them to the vocal mix. If they're for effects, I'm going to route them, or music rather, I'm going to route them to the music mix. Okay. So that's there for me. I don't have any plugins on here. I might also want to do a little something here to affect the sound of all the music or all of the vocals. Or I might want to do something funky like do a parallel compression, right? We'll learn about parallel compression in another video, all right? But I might want to take all the music and run it through a bus to do parallel compression to give it a little bit more energy, or maybe even the vocals, right? But this gives me the ability to do all of that, right? So those are sitting right here. Then I have my mix bus, okay? I like to create a dedicated mix bus. Now, every DAW is going to have a master channel. In Luna, it's called main, right? So I have it hidden, but it's there. Just goes to my hardware output, right? I have main there. In Pro Tools, it's just your master fader. In Logic Pro, it's called, stereo outs. And then you also have a main fader there as well. I like to create my own mix bus. One of the reasons why I do my own dedicated mix bus is because I physically print my mix, right? I'm able, if I turn my sends on, you see I already have a send going on here where I'm sending to my mix print, right? That's one reason why you may want to do that. Another reason why you may want to do that is because some of your DAWs, your master fader will process or manage your signal flow in that fader differently. You may discover that pulling down the fader, for example, on your master is actually impacting how hard your audio is hitting a compressor in your chain here. And so if you have a fade going on, that could be doing some things from a processing perspective that you don't want it to do, right? Pro Tools, for example, does that, right? So those are things that you may discover. But I have just a dedicated mix bus here. And also, another reason why I like to have a dedicated mix bus that I create is I might want to do some tricks with panning. The main here, as you can see, does not have any panning here. It's just really a way to control your hardware output. So it doesn't have that. I might want to do some panning tricks. There might just be some things I want to be able to do with my overall mix bus. All right. And so I have a dedicated mix bus. This is the one place in my template where you see I have plugins because I always use these same plugins, typically in this same order, on my mix bus, and I mix through these plugins. I have these plugins sitting at a very nominal setting, meaning that nothing's really dialed in, but you'll discover that some plugins, the minute you put them onto a channel, even without you touching anything, you'll hear it sonically affecting the character of your mix. All right. And so I like to mix through these. in that way. Let's go through these very quickly. I have my Slate virtual mix bus, right? Card up in the top. If you're interested in the Slate Digital All Access Pass, you want to get some information about that, I've done a video to help you with that. I have this again at a very, minimal setting, nominal setting here. It's not doing anything. I just have it going through on the SSL 4000G setting because I love the SSL 4000G. After that, so going from that, I have the Pultec Pro. I just love this is one of those plugins that as soon as you drop it on, you hear it just thickens things up a little bit. It warms the mix up a little bit without you changing anything. So I have that here, and I'll use this to do a little bit of shaping. I don't want to do a lot of stuff going on in here, but I'll do a little bit of shaping of my mix. But I just love the sound of this plugin. This is by Universal Audio, of course. Then, of course, I've got my baby, the SSL Master Bus Compressor. Oh, I just love it. This is from Waves, by the way. You can find this in several different places. SSL has their own plugin, but I have it going into the compressor from the EQ. Now I could switch them around. I tend to do it in this order. I feel like having the compressor after the EQ makes your mix a little bit warmer, where putting the EQ after the compressor can cause make your mix a little bit brighter. So depending on what I want to do, I can switch those. And then from that, I have, again, Slate Digital. I have the virtual tape machine, and I'm going to have it set up here with the settings, 15 IPS, and I'm using a 1/2 inch tape. Okay. And so that's sitting on my mix bus every time. I know I'm always going to use all these. So in this order, so I just have them set up. And I just have them sitting there. They're very, minimal settings. Nothing really is going to be going on with them. It just gives me a nice sound, and then I'll come back towards the conclusion of the mix and go through and really dial in specific things that I want for each thing there. Okay. And that is my mix bus. And then, as I said, I am sending the complete mix bus pre-fader to this mix print audio channel. Really, I'm sending it to in Luna a mix print out, left, and right, which is what I've named the virtual buses or that are there in console. And then I have those feeding into my mix print. And so anything that's coming from here is going to show up here, and I can print my mix. I like to print my mix into the session for a few reasons. One, because that kind of gives me a backup. The mix is actually there physically as a 2-track in the session. So if something ever happens and, I lose the mix or something, it's there in my session. My session is backed up somewhere. So I basically always have my mix. I always also like to print my mix because it gives me one last chance to listen through, catch any errors, any things that, I maybe have missed while I was mixing or going through. It kind of gives me a last quality control as I'm printing it. And it also allows me, if there are any errors, if my computer glitches or something and it stops printing or stops the bounce, I can just restart it right from that spot instead of having to go all the way back from the beginning. So for those reasons, I like to print my mix. And frankly, I just do it because that's what I want to do. You don't have to print your mix into the session, but I just like to do that. Okay, so this is my mix template. So anytime I get ready to start a mix, I can dial in or pull up this template and away I go. Okay, so I hope that looking at my template has kind of helped you and given you some ideas as to maybe why you want to have a mixed template. If you already have one, hopefully it gave you some things maybe that you hadn't considered that you could do inside of yours. I'm going to do a whole complete separate series of videos going through some basic things like how do I create a track? How do I create a bus? How do I do this routing stuff you're talking about? What's a send and how do I do that, right? Because you can do this also in any, I keep smacking my microphone. It must have done something to me. You can do this inside of any DAW. I'm in Luna. You can do this exact same thing. Matter of fact, I have this exact same template in Pro Tools. I have this exact same template set up in Logic. You can do the exact same thing in every single DAW. I'm sure if I was using Studio One or Reaper or any other DAW, I could do the same thing there. So whatever DAW you're using, you can apply this there. Leave comments in the comment section. Let me know what you think about my mix template. You see some things that maybe you think I could be doing better or differently. Do you have some questions maybe about some of the things that I'm doing that you want to ask about? Or maybe you want to share how you're setting up your mix template, things you're including, things you're not including, leave comments in the comment section and let me know. Love to hear from you. Love to talk about those kind of things. All right, it's been fun sharing my template with you. Have fun creating yours or tweaking yours if that's what you're going to do. And I'll see you guys again soon. Peace.